Well, absolutely. That's the whole point that I'm trying to make. That we have heard of home improvements, we have heard of lavish expenditure, at the taxpayers' expense. Mind you, all of that happening from a party, as I was mentioning, which calls itself the Aam Aadmi Party, which had promised time and again that its ministers would be staying in flats, and their frugality is something that they have advertised time and again. But all of this happening in the midst of COVID is really what raises the entire issue of propriety when it comes to this entire story. And that is the reason in public interest that we are putting it out. Remember that this is a time when Delhiites were struggling for beds, they were struggling for oxygen, they were struggling for platelets, they were struggling for medicine. And at a time like this, we have this kind of lavish expenditure, tranche after tranche of expenditure, 7 crores, 1 crore, 9 crores, all of these tranches that are coming out for this kind of a luxury splurge as far as the chief minister's residence.
Just out of curiosity, were there any complaints raised about the condition of the house which necessitated this kind of overhaul, Madhav?
Well, that is normally the case, Padmaja, that very often that they do cite the fact that the house is not in good condition. But even if there was some kind of reason for improvement, what can justify these kind of massive bills? That's a question that the Aam Aadmi Party will have to answer the people of Delhi, where they have been elected. It is on the basis of the public expenditure, public exchequer, that this expenditure has been occurred, and therefore it is incumbent for somebody who's a people's representative to come and explain what really necessitated this kind of huge splurge. Because all of this happening in the midst of COVID raises some very, very serious questions.
Yes.
There's a huge amount of back and forth between the centre, between the state, about setting up, these massive temporary COVID facilities. There were a huge one at Chhatarpur, I beg your pardon, which had been set up, and that too saw a lot of back and forth between the centre and the state about resources, about how the state had only limited resources and they need the centre's help. What about the resources that were then being poured into the chief minister's residence? And was that not in a way taking away from what could have perhaps gone to the common man in Delhi? These are some very important and some very basic questions that the Aam Aadmi Party will have to at some point respond, because it raises very, very serious questions about the kind of governance, about the kind of promises that have been made and what has ultimately been delivered by the rulers of Delhi.
And here you have it. Here you have it. This is the document that shows very clearly the kind of expenses that were done on the curtains. We've come just to point number 2 of the kind of expenses that we are talking about. This cannot be denied. This cannot be shrugged off, because it is all here in black and white. And at that time, Satyendra Jain was the PWD minister, if I'm not mistaken. And that is the time. It is the timing, really. That's what we are talking about. You've seen the kind of splurge that was done on renovating the chief minister's residence at 6 Flagstaff Road in itself. And we're saying this again and again. There is nothing illegal. But the question raised is about the positioning that the Aam Aadmi Party itself has done. Time and again, the same party has gone out and said, अरे सारे नेता चोर हैं, अरे इनको देखो टैक्स पेयर का पैसा खा रहे हैं, अरे बड़े बड़े बंगलों में रहते हैं, अरे ये तो हमारे पैसों पे पलते हैं. But the same people can argue that this bungalow will be used by all the future chief ministers. The shocking thing is the timing of this expenditure. When Delhi, along with the rest of the country, was in the throes of COVID crisis, it's at that very time that this money was being sanctioned and spent on a swanky upgrade. All the time when the Aam Aadmi Party was saying, we don't have the wherewithal to give oxygen and vaccines for people of Delhi. Crores were being spent on marble flooring, on a dresser, on curtains. The question is about propriety and priorities.